Guys, if you caught my video yesterday, you saw that I was discussing some of the Bulls' most underrated players in franchise history, which, by the way, thanks to all of you who added in players that I missed. I suspected that I would miss some players, and I was looking to you guys to add in any others. Guys like John Salmons, Nate Robinson, Craig Hodges, all underrated players in their own right. For Nate Robinson, he was one of those few players who actually wasn't that great for most of the teams that he played on and always had some issues with each, but he had some of the best years of his career with the Bulls, which is usually the opposite for most players who come to play in Chicago. I feel like they always have their best years on other teams. Guys like Kyle Korver come to mind. But anyway, as I was putting that video together and stringing some of the old highlight footage of these players, I couldn't help but get a little nostalgic, especially from the Derrick Rose era Bulls, since it's a little more fresh in my memory, and I couldn't help but think how much we really could use some of these high energy guys we had from those years. Honestly, we really haven't had those type of players in the past 5 years or so. And I realized, because if you've been following my channel for a while now, I'm always talking about wanting to see energy, hustle, and effort on the court for the whole 48 minutes. I feel like I say it all the time here, and when I'm the most disappointed in the Bulls is when they play with such low energy and effort. And I realized I've never really gotten out of that mindset of what I witnessed watching that 2010-11 Bulls team, and even the few years after that, because even after Rose got injured, that team still played with hustle and grit, which got them to the playoffs all those years, even without Rose when he was injured. And anyway, it made me realize we need more of these type of hustle and energy players in order to be successful. Hustle and energy players mainly on the defensive end, and that's what I want to talk about today. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. I hope you're all doing well. Before I get into the topic, as you know, the Bulls will be taking on the Raptors this evening, and if you've been following the latest on the Raptors and their extensive list of players under the health and safety protocol, it's 5 players, including Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, and OG Anunoby, arguably their best players. You can add Kyle Lauri to that as well. So guys, if the Bulls can't win this game, I may have to just retire from being a Bulls fan. That would be 3 straight games against shorthanded teams, all at home. Bulls need to win this game, plain and simple, especially given the Raptors just played last night and will be traveling over to Chicago from Charlotte. No excuses tonight, none. Now, Garrett Temple has been ruled out for tonight's game with a sprained ankle, which is unfortunate because Temple has really been a critical glue guy for this team. But come on, the Raptors are missing 5 players. You need to win this game. Also, a report that just came out this morning, which I thought was very interesting, is that Billy Donovan is making some adjustments to the starting lineup. Satoransky and Thaddeus Young will be starting, replacing Coby White and Wendell, which I honestly think is the right call. If you caught my bold predictions video for the second half of the season, one of them was that I said at some point in the season, Coby will be coming off the bench and Sato would be taking over in the starting role. Now, I said I don't think Coby is necessarily going to see that much of a reduction in minutes. I just think having Sato, who is a better floor general and facilitator to kickstart the game, is the way to go, especially when a guy like Coby has been much more effective in playing off the ball, like we've seen. So I don't expect to see Coby's minutes necessarily reduced all that much, but rather this is a way to get the team off the right foot to start the game. And honestly, when things aren't going well, you have to make adjustments and experiment to see what is the better fit for the overall rotation. So I actually like this move by Billy Donovan, switching things up a little bit and see how the team responds as a result. We all know Wendell has been struggling, and although I can't help but think, being benched and how that's going to bode for his confidence, but maybe this will be a fire that kind of lights under him and getting back into the starting 5. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. So going back to the early 2010 Bulls, that hard-nosed defensive intensity-focused team powered by Derrick Rose on offense. I mean, you look at that roster, you had guys like Taj Gibson, Luol Deng, Joakim Noah, Ronnie Brewer, CJ Watson, all high energy, high impact hustle players. I mean, I would even argue, as much as I was never a fan of Carlos Boozer, mainly because he just didn't work out for the Bulls as their consolation prize in free agency in 2010 after they missed out on LeBron, Wade, and Bosh. But that aside, Boozer wasn't a good defensive player, but he was probably one of the most energetic players out there, getting his team hyped on virtually every play. I can't tell you how many times I heard Boozer shout "and one" over the broadcast, whether it was him who actually made the shot or one of his teammates. Boozer may not have been as effective as us Bulls fans would have liked to have seen, but he was a good teammate in encouraging his guys and getting everyone to feed off his energy, which in my view is actually very valuable. So let's talk about this current Bulls team, because I do think this has been the best Bulls team we have seen since the Jimmy Butler trade, and they have shown the most energy and emotion I've seen since that time as well, but it's few and far between, let's be honest. It's nothing like what we saw in the 2010-11 season with all those guys that I just mentioned. So as I was thinking about it more in terms of what guys around the league I want to see added to this roster, whether it be in the offseason or potentially a trade before the deadline, I started to change my mind a bit on some of these players that I was wanting to see before. Obviously, the most common theme across Bulls fans is to get Andre Drummond, because we all know he's available in a trade from the Cavs, which I was all for, as long as the Bulls didn't have to trade too much for him, because quite frankly, they shouldn't, given the Cavs have very little leverage. The fact that Drummond is on an expiring deal, and although he fits a lot of the things the Bulls are looking for, there are still questions around his attitude, work ethic, and as great as he is and what he does in crashing the boards and being a decent rim protector, he doesn't really fit all that well in today's NBA and a pace and space type system. But in any event, I was all about getting Drummond. Maybe not necessarily getting him before the trade deadline, but perhaps in the offseason when he becomes a free agent and hopefully at a lower price point. But I look at Drummond as a player, and he's not really that energy hustle type player that you would have seen, say, from Joakim Noah, or even a guy that you can get on your team that can get the team hyped anyway, like Carlos Boozer. And like I said, the biggest knock on Drummond is there's questions around his overall work ethic and hustle on the court. Then, of course, there's Lonzo Ball, another name that has been linked to the Bulls in trade rumors. If you've been watching the channel, you know that I am not a big Lonzo Ball fan and not really for trading for him to bring him in, partly because he's going to be a restricted free agent, and for the Bulls, you're likely going to have to trade too much for him. And then there's the possibility that as a restricted free agent, a team is going to way overpay him with an offer that the Bulls would then be forced to match, because you wouldn't want to have to lose all of those assets for nothing. And then you're locked into a bad contract. And which brings me to this topic, for a guy who doesn't really seem to have the work ethic, the drive, the desire to get better. Now, I know some of you have been calling me out that that's not really true about Lonzo, and I'm not really being fair. And you're right, to be fair, you guys are right, because I haven't really watched much of Lonzo at all this season. I mainly was focused on him, watching his play when he was with the Lakers, just because there was so much hype about this kid, and thought this guy just isn't engaged. He doesn't seem to have that grit to live up to his potential that we were all promised. Now, like I said, I like the idea of Lonzo because one thing he does do well is he's a good playmaker. He has high basketball IQ in terms of running an offense. He's a decent defender, which these are all things the Bulls need. So I'm not saying I'm opposed to bringing in guys like Drummond or Lonzo Ball, for the right price, of course. But what I really want to see brought to this Bulls team is a guy that gets these younger guys motivated, a guy that will bring the kind of energy, passion, and intensity the rest of the roster can feed off of, and not even necessarily just one guy, potentially a few. That would be nice, kind of like what we had in 2011 with Noah, Taj, Boozer, and even Ronnie Brewer. Not necessarily the guys that were the most skilled in terms of their sheer athletic abilities, but they brought an infectious energy that was just contagious and felt across the whole team. So what I'm looking for when I'm looking at guys and I'm wanting to see that the Bulls potentially might go after, obviously bringing in players where the Bulls have a great need for, so defensively minded, a guy who can crash the boards, but more so I'm looking at players who bring that hustle and effort, leaving it all on the court to get the rest of the guys hyped and motivated to play their hardest. One guy, which I've actually mentioned before, so this one isn't all that new, Jackson Hayes, a young athletic big man who has shown a lot of promise, and he definitely brings that energy that the Bulls need. Still a lot of aspects of his game that he needs to work on, but one thing he is good at is protecting the rim, a great shot blocker when you look at his per 36 minutes in terms of blocks per game. Another guy I'm thinking of, and I honestly can't even believe I'm saying this because I've really despised this player in so many ways, but how about Draymond Green? I know Draymond is on the decline. He's kind of a shell of what he used to be. I'm not saying he's going to be an answer to all the Bulls' problems, but rather a high energy veteran that the Bulls could learn from. He can be a mentor to, because for all of Draymond's annoying antics, which is why I've never liked him, he's a pretty smart basketball player. He knows the game of basketball well, and to be able to bring in a veteran voice for these young guys, getting them excited to play, whether he's on the court or cheering them on from the bench, I think would be incredibly valuable. Then finally, and this one is a bit different because it's not about bringing in a player, but rather adding a former player to the coaching staff to get these young guys into shape, and bring that drive and hustle, I would love to see the Bulls bring in their former All-Star and Defensive Player of the Year in Joakim Noah as an assistant coach. He already has ties to Billy Donovan, given Donovan coached Joakim in Florida, leading them to 2 national titles. Noah obviously already has ties to the Bulls organization. I think bringing in a guy like Noah to work with Wendell, Daniel Gafford, Lauri Markkanen, to be a mentor to these young big men, whipping them into shape and hoping that some of Noah's intensity and energy rubs off on them, would be great for their overall development and confidence. I really do think Noah would be a perfect fit for that role. I want to hear what you guys think though. Who do you think are some high impact, high energy, hustle type players that the Bulls could really benefit from having in their lineup? Not necessarily as a star player, although the Bulls still do need to get Lavine some help and bring in some more star talent, but even just a player that can bring some of that grit and intensity to this ball club. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And then again, as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I post daily Bulls content. I will have a live chat for the game against the Raptors later tonight, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks again for tuning in as always, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.